Hello and welcome into another episode of Friar Territory on the Foul Territory Network. I'm Kyle Glaser alongside three-time Padres All-Star closer Heath Bell, here to break down all things San Diego Padres and MLB as a whole. Heath, good to be back on with you.
Well, thanks for having me again. It's been a fun week so far.
Absolutely. So we're going to dive into the Padres roster, particularly pitchers and catchers, something that is very near and dear to your heart. But I have to start with a story you told me after we got off the air last week. It was too good. We have to blast it out to the world. You told me that your secret to throwing hard was chocolate chip cookies. Can you extrapolate on or explain that a little bit?
Well, the story came about was I don't know why there was some those mother's cookies that comes in twos on my chair. It was on like everybody's chair, and they were interviewing me, and I just kind of said that because I do love a good chocolate chip cookie. Growing up, my mom showed me how to make them. I have a great recipe that I just whip stuff together, and my kids and family are like, "It's amazing how good you are at baking." And I just said, when I eat a chocolate chip cookie, I feel good, and when I feel good, I throw hard, and I'm feeling good here in San Diego. So it just kind of came about that, and I didn't know about it at the time, but then the next couple weeks in the mail, I'm getting cookies, and I probably should have done it with Mother or Girl Scout cookies because unfortunately I've been buying those right now. Not too many because I don't need them. But yeah, it's just I feel like when you play well when you're happy and you're relaxed, and what's better than having a chocolate chip cookie? Seriously. So
That is certainly the case. So forget lean protein, forget fruits and veggies, chocolate chip cookies, folks.
well,
That'll make you
here's
throw
the thing,
gas.
like so everybody's into protein bars and this and that. So there was one year I go, hey, you remember that one protein bar I was telling our fitness guy? It's called Swan. It's with an S. I can't. And he's like, I'm like, it was the original protein bar. And he's like, I'm like, I know where to buy them. And I knew what I was doing. Is the next day I went to Costco. I bought a case of Snickers, and then I brought it in. I go, here's the original protein bar. And he was like, we can't have those because of peanuts, and it has to be over here, and allergies. And I'm like, this is what we grew up. We had like a soda, and if you need some energy, here you go, kid. Here's your Snickers. And it got us wild up. I mean, why can't we have that now? So I mean, it's just. I mean, I'm going with the old school. I mean, there's probably some sugars and stuff I'm not supposed to have and all that stuff. But hey, if you need a pick me up, I mean, the Snickers taste way better than the protein bars now. And my wife's trying to be all, natural and this and that. And I'm still, a Snickers is still better. So just,
Caffeine and sugar. There we go. Next time before next men's league game, I
well,
think just
here's the
two
thing.
Snickers.
Nobody got mad at us doing caffeine and sugar, but now they're like, hey, you're drinking too many Red Bulls, you're drinking too Monster drinks or whatever it is. That's unsafe. But nobody said, coffee or soda and a candy bar was like, oh, that's unsafe. So, I mean, think about it. I don't know.
Fair enough.
Different times.
Hey, you know what? It worked for you, and that's what matters. Clearly, you had a fantastic career, and whatever tools you needed to make it happen, props. It worked out just fine for you, to say the least. Heath, we're moving closer and closer to spring training, and as of right now, the Padres' only major league free agent signing was Elias Diaz, catcher. They brought him back on a 1 year, $3.5 million deal. And we're seeing the rest of the National League contenders really load up. Obviously, we've talked about the Dodgers with signing Roki Sasaki and bringing back Teoscar Hernandez and Blake Trinan and signing Blake Snell, among many, many others. The Mets, we saw bring back Pete Alonso yesterday on a deal that I think was for a lesser dollar amount than most people expected. They obviously signed Juan Soto to the largest deal in Major League Baseball history. Those are your two NLCS contenders last year, or that's your NLCS matchup last year, I should say, last year. And both of them are getting better. The Padres right now have been a little more limited with their financial resources. And I thought it was interesting that they spent the limited money they had on a catcher when I did think their hole in left field was more acute than their hole at catcher. That said, it's very, very important to have a catcher who, can handle the pitching staff and do the things the pitchers want. I wanted to ask you, what were the things that you looked for in a catcher, and what were the traits of the catchers that you really enjoyed throwing to in your career?
Well, I mean, in San Diego, I had Josh Bard and I had Nick Hundley after that, and those guys could block the ball. Were they the best guys to throw people out? Not the best, but they did it. And I think the most important thing with those guys, those are probably my two favorite catchers over the years.
Yeah.
And I've had some other great guys out there. You know, Mike Piazza was out there. He was on tail end with the Mets. And it's if you have a good relationship with the catcher and pitcher, you know, if you have a good relationship with your catcher, you kind of know how to talk. You know, I know they do all the signs and, you know, like the technology of whatnot, but it's about, hey, you know, I want to throw a fastball and he's calling curveball or this and that, or do you just listen to the catcher and just do whatever he wants? Some pitchers they think, you know, some like I like to say now a lot of pitchers are throwers. They just listen to the catcher and just do it. But pitching is sometimes you think, sometimes you don't have your best fastball or your best changeup, or you're not believing in your changeup that day. And the catcher can make you like believe in it better than you if you have that relationship with him. And that's what's really important with the catchers. But nowadays, I feel like catchers, it's about throwing people out and hitting. And so I think or like you care about your starters and not your relievers, because relievers just do what I tell you to do. And I had some catchers like that we just didn't mesh because, yeah, I threw really hard back in the day, but I also felt like I was pitching in high school when I was topping out at 81 miles an hour. I still feel like I had to pitch. I just couldn't rear back and just throw 100 miles an hour because I didn't do that until I got to in the minor leagues or, you know, got stronger or developed or whatnot. But it's important to have a relationship with your catcher. And if the pitcher trusts the catcher, then the pitcher, I feel like, will do better and do more. It's kind of like, you know, feeling good about yourself. But if you've had a catcher that is, you know, thinks that, hey, you should throw more fastballs, and you're like, but I want to throw more breaking balls. Now you guys aren't agreeing with stuff. So yeah, it's important to have a good catcher, but you got to have a good relationship with a good catcher. So, and I think Benji Molina, he was always good at doing that. But, you know, with the Padres, you know, we need a hitter. I looked at it like catching's important, but, you know, like to you, left field is very important to us. But don't we have the number one prospect catcher in the game? When is he going to be ready? Or what, you know, that's why I don't like labeling prospects until they get to AA. Yeah. Because if your number one prospect's in A ball, okay, you still got a long way to go. And it's like, you know, wait until he proves himself in AA before you put a big, you know, thing of that on there. But, you know, if we have so many good prospect catchers, then why are we going out and getting a catcher? So, well, I understand why.
Yeah, I think with Ethan South, it's important to remember that as talented as he is, he's 18 years old. He'll turn 19 this summer. If he was in the United States, he'd be a high school senior this year. This is still a very, very young kid who needs.
Well, what about Machado? He got to the big leagues at 18.
19, 20. Yeah. And again, those guys are very, very rare.
If they're going to be that style of guy, you know, this next generation, Machado Jr., Ken Griffey Jr., you know, Bryce, that type of guy, then he should be there this year.
Well, I think with catchers, we generally see it take longer. You know, it was interesting. Yadier Molina is the only catcher 21 or younger to get to start as many games as he did over the last decade or so. Francisco Alvarez with the Mets was approaching it. So we do see catchers take a long time. I think I get signing Elias Diaz from that perspective. I think it's important to give Ethan Salas time to develop and not rush him. I think for me, one of the things that I looked at it as is, and this is where the relationship aspect is really important that you brought up. You know, a catcher, yes, they have to be good, you know, receivers. They have to be good blockers. They have to be able to throw runners out, but they also have to be good psychologists in a lot of ways. They have to have that chemistry. They have to have those human relationships, that leadership skills. The Padres, I think on paper, if you look at it, you say, look, you have Luis Campusano, you have Martin Maldonado, two guys with big league time, Brett Sullivan, a third catcher. I thought you could probably go into the season with that as your catchers and use the limited financial resources they have to go sign a left fielder. I personally would have preferred them to see the $3.5 million they used to sign Elias Diaz, put that toward Austin Hayes, who signed with the Reds for 1 year and $5 million. At the same time, I do think it's notable, you know, Luis Campusano has shown the ability to hit. His defensive ability has always been kind of, depends who you ask, but fringy-ish. But I think the main thing with him is he's always had, some issues with maturity, with leadership, and just being able to really, really build those important relationships with pitchers. That's something that has not come naturally to him. And I thought it said a lot about Elias Diaz that they went out and signed him, that maybe they don't think Luis Campusano is the guy that they can rely on behind the plate. So I think on paper you see Campusano and Maldonado, one's offensive, one defensive. Maybe you can mix and match it. I think it said a lot more to me about how they see Luis Campusano.
I mean, you got Machado. I keep saying Machado, Maldonado. That sometimes back in the day, I guess 20, 30 years ago, sometimes you had a really good catcher that was defense.
Yeah, and
he did an offense, and it was like, well, I'm going to take that over, offense. And now it's like you have to be defense and offense oriented. Basically you have to be Molina. And that's what everybody's looking for the next one, where I think, like, if I was GM right now, I'd be like you. I'd probably go get a left fielder for a 1-year rental and go with the guys that I have, catching. And, if you don't see, it's just tough because you got management going on and everybody's talking about that. But, like I've said earlier, and I've said to friends that we need to start developing with our farm system. I mean, who's the AAA catcher and the AA catcher? Can they bridge the gap for a year, those two guys, with Campusano or somebody? We don't need to because we have Diaz now, but we're going to have to do that with left field. Do we have an outfielder that can play a solid left field in AA or AAA, that maybe this guy will be good for 2 months and maybe he'll kind of fizzle out a little bit and then we'll bring another guy? Maybe we don't have an everyday guy and we platoon 2 guys. That worked back in the day with Scott Harrison and Chase Headley. They were platooning left field, and then whoever was hot we went with, and as soon as you got cold, the next guy. But there wasn't a competition. It was let's go win for the team. And hey, he's hot right now, so I'm going to let him play. And then when he falls off, I'm going to make sure I'm ready. So I'm going to get hot when he's not. And so we always kind of have a left fielder that's somewhat hot. And, that was in 2010. And unfortunately, we went out and got Ryan Ludwig. That turned out not to be hot, unfortunately. And then those 2 guys sat the bench for a while and we kind of struggled. But we were doing really well platooning those 2 guys. So maybe that's what the Padres need to do. I mean, it's unfortunate what's going on and we don't have the money to spend like we have, but we're still in the probably top 10 salaries of the Major League Baseball, and we probably have to drop it a little bit just because of financially of management now. And guys, salaries are going to increase the next couple of years. So it's like, I really think, starting pitching is kind of an issue. Yeah. But are they going to get rid of King, or are they going to get rid of Cease? That's what worries me. Like, if we don't do well this year, are they on the trading block? What's the deal? Are we going to sign them or not? And then we're going to need starting pitching again. So, I mean, Joe will be back not this year, but next year. But then Darvish is another year older. Yeah. And it's just like, okay, where do we go? We need to start developing instead of start looking for other people and other organizations. Can we get your young guy? What about our development? So that's, we need to find a Jake Peavy. We need to find, guys, like Mackenzie Gore that we traded off, or somebody like that can be a good, solid big league pitcher. He doesn't have to be an ace like Jake Peavy, but we need to find some guys like that. Like Andy Ashby. I just saw him at fantasy camp. At best, he was probably a number 2, but he was a big game pitcher and he pitched great, had some great seasons there, but I don't think anybody ever would call him a number 1, but he knew it, but he knew he was a solid pitcher. And when he wanted the ball when it was a big game. So we need to find those guys. We need to start developing those guys. And that's where I think the Padres need to be, and the fans need to realize, if we don't develop guys, then we're going to struggle the next couple of years.
Well, and it's an interesting, broader picture, because the Padres have done a good job drafting and developing, but they've traded all these really good young prospects for the proven big leaguers. And there have certainly been some trades that have worked out really, really well for them in that regard. Darvish trade, Joe Musgrove trade, Blake Snell trade. There have been some others that have really come back to bite them. The Austin Nola trade, the Mike Clevenger trade. And it's interesting looking around the league. There's a lot of really good, productive big leaguers who were Padres prospects, whether it's Again, Andres Munoz over in Seattle. You mentioned Mackenzie Gore. You mentioned C.J. Abrams. Cal Quantrill had a few good years. Ty France had a good few years. David Bednar with the Pirates. So there certainly have been some really good players that have been drafted and developed by the Padres, but they've typically been traded away for veterans with, mixed results. And I think we're starting to see now the receipts are starting to come due a little bit. You mentioned the farm system depth. There's some talented players, but they're all teenagers in A-ball. And, as you know, if you have 5 really good teenagers in the lower levels, odds are only one of them is going to really make it, maybe 2. And there isn't that organizational depth. And that's where I think a lot of the positional shortcomings are concerning. They don't really have, guys in triple A or double A that you feel good about giving regular at-bats to in the majors. Tirso Ornelas, a lot of people see him as a left-handed bench bat, not a guy you want to give 600 ABs. And you look around position player-wise, there's some pitching depth in the upper levels, but there's really no position player depth. And I would argue even their bench right now is a lot of guys you'd prefer to see in AAA, and some of the guys in the starting lineup are guys you'd prefer to see on the big league bench. So that's where the Padres find themselves in a little bit of a hole here, that they have multiple spots that need help with very limited financial resources. And you're right, if they trade Dylan Cease or Michael King, it's not going to make them better, which makes me think, you look at where their strengths are. Robert Suarez is the guy who is making some money. You look at the Padres bullpen. Obviously, you don't get better if you trade Robert Suarez, but you can survive. You have Jeremiah Estrada. You have Adrian Morejon. You have Jason Adam. Whereas if you trade King or Cease, you're already, not great rotation. It just gets even shakier. I do think Suarez is the guy to keep an eye on here. If they need to make a trade and they can withstand it, that's the one they could probably withstand the most.
Yeah, I agree there. It's just the thing is you can't look for a Tatis Jr. You can't look for a Machado.
Yeah,
you have to, like giving a regular position player 600 bats. Yeah. Let's find a guy that we could give 200 bats. Not off the bench, because off the bench you get about 100 bats or something like that. But maybe this guy could play against lefties. Maybe this guy could play against righties, or you got to fill it in, figure that out. Like maybe you have 4 guys that bridge the gap in the field. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those things that I'm not looking for the next star to be in left field, but I'm looking for a guy I'm looking for a group of guys that could give me a chance to win the game and not hurt us in left field. Yeah. That's what I'm looking for. Maybe against we're playing the West and say they throw harder and this guy hits the ball better if they throw hard. This guy hits better off a junk. Yeah. And then this guy's a speedy guy that just slaps the ball and he's getting super hot in AAA. Well, let's bring him up because he's hot. St. Louis used to do that all the time. When somebody was hot, they bring him up. And as soon as they got cold, they send him back down. But my biggest thing, and I thought all the great managers did this, when a guy got called up, they put him in right away. It wasn't, well, hey, we're going to just he's going to sit in the dugout, maybe give him a pitch hit. We'll find a right situation for him. No, put him out there. Put him in the right away. So like if his eyes get huge and he gets overwhelmed, well, then you're not ready, kid. We'll send you back out and we'll find somebody else. But maybe, but you're sitting there thinking about, hey, okay, when I play, that's the worst thing that can happen is a ball player starts thinking. But if they just go out there and play, they're not thinking. They're just about playing. That's all they care about. So I'm not looking for the next big star, but they got to have somebody in AA and AAA that, maybe he's a AAA player like kind of the Mets thought me. I was a AAA player, but I got up there and then the San Diego was like, I think you're better than a AAA player. I think you could be a big leaguer and just go with that. So it's hard trying to, I always feel like we're always looking we're looking for other people, other organizations to help us. Yeah. And we'll trade our young prospects instead of let's bring our young prospects up and develop them and make them into, a Tatis player or even a Coneworth that is, comes up with some big hits, but he's not the superstar of the team, or a fan favorite like, Kim. Unfortunately, we lost him, but, it's just I hate how I love how Bogart's going back to shortstop because he's a shortstop when he signed him as a shortstop. But, okay, well, we'll try him over here. We'll try him over here. We'll mix this up, mix that up. Dude, he signs a shortstop. Let him play. People have bad years, people have good years. I mean, Machado, our big star, and Tatis, they've had bad years and they've had good years, but they've had more good years than bad years. And you gotta believe in those guys. We need to give them more cookies to eat, I guess. So maybe some of them like peanut butter cookies or almond cookies. I don't like cookies with nuts in it, but that's the thing is like we just need to find these guys where they're happy, they're fun, and I mean San Diego's awesome and the fans are awesome. So yeah.
You raised an interesting point about, not needing to find a superstar, but just finding an upgrade. And I think that's something that AJ Preller really struggled with early in his career as a GM. He was always hunting for the superstar and the stars only. And a lot of times as a result, you had rosters that were really, really top heavy with, great top 4 or 5 hitters, but the bottom of the lineup just was not sufficient to, contend for a division title. I'm sorry?
There's a huge fall off.
Huge fall off. And I thought that was something that AJ Preller really struggled with, was understanding, yes, you need stars, but you also need depth. Championship teams have both. Recently, I think he and his lieutenants have done a much better job. I want to give them credit at finding guys who can, provide them that depth to help round out a roster and then helping them get better. Jurickson Profar last year was signed for 1 year, $1 million. We saw it with Seth Lugo. We saw it with Michael Wacha. They've gotten better at it. There's still room for improvement. And that's where, for me, I think there are still some free agents who similarly could sign for, 1 year deals, low dollar amounts, and maybe they help them get better. The main guy that I'm actually looking at on the rotation side is former Padre Cal Quantrill. He's 29 years old. And the thing with Quantrill is, only 2 years ago, he was starting game 1 of a playoff series for Cleveland. Last year, he pitched in Colorado. Look, he walked too many batters, led the majors in walks. The peripherals were not great. But he had a high 4 ERA, gave, the Rockies 150 innings. And look, a high 4 ERA in Coors Field, I don't think it's a huge stretch to say you bring him into San Diego, get him with Ruben Niebla, have him pitch in Petco Park. That becomes a low 4 ERA. This pretty consistently gives you 150 innings a year. That's valuable as a number 4 starter. And then Matt Waldron and Randy Vasquez are competing for the 5 spot instead of one's the 4, one's the 5. That's the kind of small upgrade that will help. Again, is Cal Quantrill going to be a superstar and an all-star? No, but a guy gives you 150 innings of a low 4 ERA and, good for 5 or 6 innings a start. There's value there.
Yeah, you're perfect. I think you need to be the GM because that sounds like a great idea. Then, hey, let's take our 2 young guys. Let's compete. Who best man wins the job. I mean, you honestly just tell them, say, hey, best man wins the job. Let's go. They're going to raise their game. And then here's the other aspect. Say one of them wins. I'm not going to say their names because, then I'm rooting for one of them. But if one of them wins and his first 3 starts are struggle and the other guy's in AAA dominating, you flip-flop them. And it's like I said, this year, our number 5 rotation are these 2 guys. And we're going with the hot hand. This guy might have it for 5 or 6 starts, and then he might fall off once or twice. Well, this guy in AAA is tearing it up. Let's bring him up. So, and we're just going to use 2 guys in one spot, and I think we can do that in AAA. I think we can do that in the starting rotation, but it has to be not like, well, really like him over him, or hey, they're competing for the spots, and then right at the end of spring training we sign somebody, and then here's the aspect is, do the guys really trust what the coaches / general manager is telling them? If they change all of a sudden, hey, you're going to be my first baseman. And then all of a sudden you're playing second base. You're going to be my 5th starter. And then all of a sudden you go to the bullpen because you've had a couple times, but we like you. We want you to stay in the bullpen, but we just need somebody else to start right now. It's like, okay, great. I'm up here, but I don't really trust you any guys because you're lying to me. And I really believe the best organizations don't lie to their guys. They just say, look, you're sucking right now. But we like you. We need to get you a little bit more sharp. So AAA is a perfect place to go down and go, hey, like say Suarez, but we didn't have time last year. We need you to go down and we need you to throw your changeup. In the next 3 games, you're going to pitch, 3 times in the next 6 days. We need every other pitch to be your changeup. We don't care if you get hit. We don't care if you give up runs. We need you to develop that. And then next week you're coming back up if you do that. And you go down there and you're like, develop it and say, if I get hit, whatever. But then all of a sudden you start throwing it good again and you come back up and now You don't have to take that game. Okay, we're up by 3 or we're up by 5. Let's go in and try to work on something. That's what AAA is for, especially young guys, to go down there, and you can't always do it on batting practice, bullpens. You got to go down there and you got to have a plan, not, okay, I'm going to get back up here because I need to start pitching better. Well, the AAA hitters are not as good as the big league hitters. You could probably go down there and dominate. But why are you not dominating up here? Why are you not doing well up here? It's because your curveball, your changeup, fastball command. We need to tell those guys. Your fastball command needs to be a little bit better. Go down there. We don't care if you get 10 runs. Work on your fastball command. As soon as we see your fastball command start developing and getting better, then we bring them back up. So I just think we need to do that a little bit more. I mean, they might be doing that behind the scenes, and maybe the guys are not doing it, but I have a funny suspicion with sabermetrics that's not happening, and we're not being as honest. I mean, Kevin Towers was really honest every time with the Padres. He would tell you guys, like, I almost got traded in 2006 for Scott Linebrink. And at the last minute, the trade went on ESPN. Heath Bell got traded to the San Diego Padres, and I'm sitting in AAA at the time. And I was like, am I traded? Calling everybody, trying to find out. And then I found out the next day, no, the Padres pulled out the last second. Well, the next year, that offseason, I get traded to San Diego.
Yeah.
I end up talking to Kevin Towers during the end of the year. And I said, hey, just curiosity, what happened with that trade? And he said, we really liked you. We had everything done. Somebody in my office sent it out. And then I went to some of the guys in the bullpen, like Trevor Hoffman, and I forget who else he said, and said, hey, I'm going to make this trade. And they said, don't, because Scott Linebrink is like the heart of our bullpen / clubhouse. He gets everybody together. And that weighed a lot on Kevin Towers. So he went and pulled the trade at the last minute, said, no, wait, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Because his players, like, that's kind of our heart. That's our guy. Even though Trevor Hoffman, he wasn't the man, he was having a great year in 2006. And I think he's a great pitcher and a great setup guy. But he was the heart in the clubhouse when they just can't give up that guy. Yeah. It's kind of like the NBA right now. They gave up Luka or something, and everybody's like, huh? No, but it's just like you gotta have a relationship with your guys, and you gotta think business, but you also gotta think, hey, is this gonna stir up the clubhouse in a bad way or good way? So, and I think competition is really good. I really do. I mean, I know when my days in the Mets, there was always competition for like one spot, and there was 3 or 4 guys always competing for it. So, and we all knew if the best man won. So, and when I went to San Diego, I'm messed up in the head, so I didn't think there was competition. I thought I was getting the job anyway, even though there was one spot and there was 6 guys going for it, and I did the best. But in my head, I was like, oh, I got this. This is mine. There's no competing. It's mine. I said one reporter in spring training like 2 weeks, and I'm like, they traded for me, so that spot's mine. Well, you're that confident? I said, no, they wanted me. They traded for me. But I was so ignorant and stuff. I just thought of that. That probably helped me out. That's probably why I did so well. But, looking back, I was like, man, I was an idiot. So, anyway. But
there's no question competition is healthy. And I think the more players the Padres have that are, proven and talented, that can fuel that competition.
But you got to have that trust that the coaches are telling you. Because I remember there was one time with the Mets, there was me, there was 3 guys. One of them was a first-round pick with the Mets, and there was 1 spot open. Actually, there was 2 spots open. So we thought the first-rounder was getting the job in the bullpen, and there was me and another guy. It was actually Pedro Feliciano. And the last day of spring, they sign a veteran. And he got the job, and the day after opening day, I got called up because he got hurt. Never pitched again in the big leagues. But it's like, that was just like, really? You just signed a guy? Like, it just it was bummed out, Yeah. Anyway, so.
Yeah, no. And again, I will say the Padres have done a good job in terms of, really understanding the heartbeat of their clubhouse. They've really run themselves as a first-class organization, both business-wise and baseball-wise, treating their employees well, treating their players well. And that's something that's been a really, really welcome development and helped elevate the franchise in a lot of ways. So I do want to give them credit there.
Well, the Padres, trust me, everybody loves playing for the Padres. I'm not saying they're not doing that. I'm just saying that really helps players develop and do well. I eat cookies, but when you coaches – you feel confident in your coaches and all that, you play well too. So I'm just trying to look at every angle. But everybody loves San Diego, even the guys in the front office that I've met now. Like this organization's fun. Yeah. So I think the family had a huge part with that too.
No question that Peter Seidler really set the tone there. Again, having my previous experience as a national writer covering all 30 organizations. Yeah, the Padres are up at the top as up in the group. The Dodgers are up there as well. The Padres are there. Just first-class organizations all the way around. Heath, before we wrap up, I do want to hit on something you talked about. Helping you get better was a big, big part of your career and your career success. We talked about it last show, mentioned it here. And with the Padres, I want to hone in on the pitchers specifically because we've talked about there are some young guys that they need to, take a next step. Matt Waldron, Randy Vasquez. There's going to be some guys that they're going to bring in on sort of bounce-back type of deals. What were the biggest things that helped you get better? What are the biggest things you look for? Is it mental? Is it physical? Is it coaching? Is it culture? What is it that helps a pitcher take the next step the most?
Honestly, I think it's the mental part. It's everybody has good stuff. Pitchers always say, hey, you know what? 20% I got my best stuff. I can get anybody out. 20% I have horrible stuff. And the rest of the time I have mediocre stuff. Or, the percentage is always different.
Yeah.
But when you have your best stuff, anybody can dominate. I mean, you could bring up an A-ball guy, and if he has his best stuff that day for 5 innings, you could bring him to the big leagues and he can dominate. But can he do it day in and day out? Yeah. Can he be like, oh my gosh, I'm facing Mookie Betts, I'm facing, Ohtani, like I never looked at the guys on the name on the back. I knew I was facing Barry Bonds. I knew I was facing, Matt Kemp or Junior, Ken Griffey Jr. or whoever else. But I never let that think like, oh, I'm facing Ken Griffey Jr. I loved watching him. I mimicked his swing, dude. He's one of my best players ever. I got his rookie baseball card and all that stuff. But I just never allowed myself to do that. It's like an example, when I first got to the big leagues, I did not look at the stands the whole first game. All I did was kept my eyes at the field. I could see it in my peripheral.
Yeah.
I looked at the field and I focused on the game because I said, it's the same distance. Nothing has changed except for a stadium. So just focused on the game. And I think guys don't focus on the mental part. It's all about how's my stuff? How's this? Because you can throw the perfect pitch down and away or in or wherever it is. The guy can swing and break a bat, get, a CNI single or whatnot. A guy can make a couple errors behind you, or we shift wrong. There's all these different factors that can happen after you release the ball. Yeah. Can you deal with that on the fly? And that's what I learned from like Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine and Pedro Martinez and Steve Traxel and Johnny Franco and Trevor Hoffman and Billy Wagner. How do you deal and change your momentum on the fly? It's almost like, what did Mike Tyson said, you have a game plan until you get hit. And then that game plan changes and you got to have a new game plan. And that's kind of what pitching is. As soon as something hits, hits the fan, shit hits the fan, somebody makes an error, or you throw a perfect pitch and you're like, how did that guy hit that? Or they told me curveball, he can't hit a curveball and he hit it. What's going on? Maybe you just don't have your best stuff that day. Maybe you got great stuff, but they're hitting everything. You just don't know. And then you start questioning yourself. Am I tipping pitches? This and that. So it's the mental part. Can you get over the mental? Can you get over? It's almost like Bud Black used to do in spring training. He would have mental games and stuff like that and put us in situations like we had a casting game where you have buckets and you had to cast. And we were all competition. We all wanted to win. But, I mean, I think Linebrink won because, man, that guy could fish. But the thing is, I thought I was a good fisherman. I thought I could cast, and I couldn't. I sucked at it. And I was like, man, I'm not this bad. I never get my, line caught up. I mean, I have, but not crazy. And I was just, it's those little mental games help you in spring training. You're not even focusing on baseball. those little mental things. So like when the shit hits the fan, you can stay calm and you don't freak out like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. You're just like, no, come on, I can do this. All right, he's doing it this way. Maybe I have to alter the way I'm doing things a little bit to do it that way. Maybe my arm's here, but today I'm going to throw it right there because it works for some reason. And normally I'm throwing it here and it does work, but it's not working. So I got to try something. So yeah, it's just the mental game is the most important thing for any big leaguer or any young guys. I always tell guys when I work with them, when you throw a pitch, and this is amazing that people don't do this. Like say you have a catcher, you're sitting in the glove right here. Do you imagine the ball going straight to the glove, like say a curveball, or straight to the glove and going to break down, or do you imagine it higher and then ending up at the glove? But you're staring at the glove. Where do you look? Where do you stare? And do you see your pitch before you throw it? And so many guys go, no, I just throw it. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to have it end up at his glove, I'll look at his head. I'm like, well, what if the catcher is 6'2" and then your next catcher is 5'5"? Does it work the same? Well, probably not. And I'm like, so you kind of have to think of something different. Well, maybe I'll look at the umpire. I'm like, well, then when are you going to figure that out? 2 home runs in, 3 runs in. I mean, so that's the part. Like Tom Glavine said to me once, he goes, a big league pitcher will figure something out in 1 or 2 pitches. A minor league guy, it'll take him 3 or 4. And that took a lot of where I could throw a pitch and go, okay, I didn't stay back right there, or I was rushing, or I need to get on top of that pitch right away. It wasn't like, man, it's not working. I just don't have it that day. Well, what am I doing wrong? As I'm pitching in the game, I was correcting myself. But I had Darren Balsley and David Ackerfeld helping me out too. But it would be, there was some times that I would be so much into myself. Balsley would come over and go, don't worry. And this would be in spring training. He's like, I know you're pitching like crap right now and you want to pitch better, but you're a good pitcher. You'll figure it out by spring training. And walked off and did not talk to me for 3 days. And I was like, I have no idea. I went to Ackerfeld. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing right now. Balsley's not even talking to me. And he goes, maybe he's telling you to stop thinking and just play catch. And I was like, okay, I haven't tried that yet. Let me try that. And actually it worked. But I trusted those guys. So that's where the trust is with pitchers. And I think with hitters and hitting coaches, and baseball is a big mental sport. So yeah, and mental part it's not physical. They're all really good. They're all studs. Even the AAA and AA guys, they're all professionals, even though we only think the big leagues are professionals. But yeah, so it's the mental part. This was hard for me. I did this, guys. So if you're listening, listen to this. It's hard, and I get it. You give up a game-winning home run to, Derek Lee, and then you see it on ESPN the next 2 months as the highlights as ESPN's coming into their baseball, and you see his call, and you go. That was hard to watch ESPN for like 2 months until they changed their highlight reel. And it was, it's just, like ESPN, coming on, and that was one of the things, Baseball Tonight, and I'm like, I can't watch it. So. Yeah.
Over and over and over. No, you're right. Poise and mental fortitude are huge separators at all levels of baseball, but certainly in the major leagues.
There's a really good book. It's called Heads Up Baseball. That kind of helped me through. And I got that in high school. My mom bought it for me. But I know guys in the big leagues that just found the book and started reading it. And it's a lot of mental part. It's easy mental games to play with yourself that makes you better mentally, So.
Yeah, no, we'll see. And again, as the Padres bring in more and more guys, we'll see who they bring in, what they work with them on, whether, how much of it's mental, how much of it's physical. But we'll see if they're able to continue the recent track record of helping guys take the next step, particularly on the mound with Ruben Niebla. Heath, this has been a blast. Thank you for joining me, and always a good time.
Thanks for having me. It's also, I have a great time. And Ruben, if you needed a mental coach, call me.
There you have it, folks. Well, this has been another edition of Friar Territory. Go ahead and give us a review, a like, and subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, whatever platform you prefer to listen or watch on. We'd love to hear from you. For Heath Bell, I'm Kyle Glaser. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
See ya.